Welcome to Legacy Unscripted, the podcast where sports and business collide. I'm your host, Russ Katzman, and here we'll skip the fluff and get straight to the hustle. From athletes turned entrepreneurs to impact-driven business leaders, we'll dive into the wins, the lessons, and yes, some of those failures that make legacies worth living. In this episode, we're going to twist things around a little bit. We're going to go with somebody that maybe you know. Todd Anthony Tyler, he's a fashion photographer. He's a TV personality. You may have seen him in ads. You may have seen him in his modeling, maybe the Netflix show. Todd, talk to us about what you're doing now and why we recognize that face.
Hey, Russ, thanks for having me on in the first place. Happy to be here today, have a chat with you. Yeah, I guess mostly the notoriety comes from the TV work. I mean, before the TV work, I did modeling for 10 plus years, lived in over 30 some countries in part doing that. So some of the recognition comes from TV commercials, magazines, catalogs. That was fun. Interesting part of my life for sure. But I think the real notoriety comes from moving into photography, getting recognized as a fashion photographer. This day and age, that means you're really highly Googleable. And from that brought me into doing TV work with Asia's Next Top Model, kind of the Nigel Barker of Asia, turned out sort of be my role. And from Asia's Next Top Model, I moved into doing another show called Fit for Fashion, which is the one that was on Netflix for a few years. So I think that's where most of the recognition comes from, face recognition, the three-name recognition from the Fit for Fashion TV show.
Very good. So I think the interesting thing, and you and I have talked about this a little bit before, the interesting thing about the entrepreneurial side of what you do is really that branding. When did it hit you that you kind of had a personal brand that you had to farm and get out there to be able to monetize that for yourself?
Actually, it started with the modeling years. It's something that you realize that when you go in and you have to stand out from the thousands of other guys that are going in there to show their portfolio or get on the runway and strut their stuff, you need to stand out a little bit. You need to have a bit of a presence. You need to sort of project and to go, hey, who's this guy? So to give it sort of a second look. So right there already you're dealing with personal branding, how you walk into the room, how you're dressed, how you present yourself, how you greet people. I mean, it's already in play right there, day in and day out, multiple times a day when you go to all those castings. So that's sort of when I would say it started for me. The whole idea of being interested in actually having, combing my hair and having a hairstyle and wearing nice clothes, that started sort of a high school thing. But the recognition about how people perceive you and that branding really started with those modeling years. Moved into when I started doing photography professionally. A bit of a long story on the whole project, how the whole thing worked with going into being a fashion photographer. Originally, I really started out being more so what I always call a National Geographic photographer, which lent to my biology days. Business-wise, made much more sense to move into doing fashion photography and advertising photography. So once again, it came back to having a character, a personality. I sort of got known for the photographer who was in decent shape, wore fitted V-neck t-shirts and cargo pants on all my shoots and moved a lot and took interesting angles. So that also started to be a brand of sorts. And then, of course, that went all the way over to TV stuff. And there I learned a lot about personal branding. With the first season of Asia's Next Top Model, I was given a PR agent. That's what really brought me into realizing it was also kind of early days of social media as well. So it kind of brought me into the power of social media, the power of your dress, your look, your lifestyle even. So all of those things impact how people perceive you, impact how your career projects, impacts your business.
Yeah. So I think that it's interesting where you go with that, because we tell companies all the time that if they don't create a culture, if they don't push a culture, it's going to create itself. But I think we've seen that quite a bit on the branding side as well, that if you don't explicitly decide what you want your brand to be, the consumers are going to decide where you are, right? They're going to put you in a high category or maybe not that high category. They're going to pay attention to you or they're not going to pay attention to you. I think consciously creating that brand is an important factor for any entrepreneur. Do you feel as if you consciously created that, or do you think you just kind of evolved into it?
Well, definitely a factor of both. The evolve part comes from just learning through experience, how people receive you, how people respond to you, whether you secure work and jobs, as you know, photography in itself, let's say, even modeling, it's a service that you're providing. So are you securing those jobs? So that's an evolution itself as well, because you learn what works, what didn't work. But then that's where it starts to become a conscious choice. Yeah. Like, okay, yeah, if I go in looking like, disheveled and not really well put together and not a little bit articulate or personable or reserved, people don't respond as well in this particular line of work. So you do have then the conscious choice, like, okay, this worked. This was what I have best reception and appeal, it seems. So let's work on that and let's develop that. So it was evolving and learning, but then you start to make conscious choices on what's working.
So it may be a softball question, but tell me how that has changed with social media.
Obviously, again, everyone who's Todd Anthony Tyler, guaranteed everyone's going to go Todd Anthony Tyler, go to your Instagram, go to your Facebook. Oh, this is who this person is. So immediately, probably in seconds, they say when you walk into a room and how you present yourself and how you dress, people are already making in seconds choices or ideas about who you are. Absolutely, that's the same thing. Once they've had you typed in on a search engine and they're looking up your social medias, immediately they define who you are. and that, how they perceive you and decide who you are in those seconds, that holds for a long time. Like, you'll meet in person, then they also still judging on your socials. Oh, so he's liked his socials. Oh, he's not like his socials. But they still default to how they perceive you when they saw you on your social media in the first place. So it's obviously a powerful aspect of how people receive you even these days.
So give me an idea then on how you've migrated from those early modeling days and even into the TV personality to being now primarily an entrepreneur and business owner.
I think part of it really was shoot right to the end, being an entrepreneur in the first place. It's always been my entrepreneurial spirit. I was the kid selling shiny rocks at the side of the road, or having the lemonade stand, or my sister and I went and pulled roses out of my mom's garden and put them in plastic bags and were selling roses at the side of the road. So I always had that person inside me, that character inside me. I guess coming from a middle class family, the direction was always education, good education, then gets you sort of a management position or a better position at a company, and then now you're set. Or going for gold and you're going to become a doctor or a lawyer. That was sort of how I was raised, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but that was the environment I grew up in. I wasn't really in an entrepreneurial sort of environment where my parents had businesses or that. So the real core of who I was and what I wanted to do was not really running somebody else's company. I always wanted to have my own company. And after I finished 4 years of biology and anthropology, I decided I think I fulfilled my need to have a degree, and now I'm going to go and run my own company. And that's how actually modeling sort of started, because it was, hey, Todd, you can make extra money doing this. Oh, yeah, really? Oh, that's neat. Hey, Todd, you could probably travel with this. Oh, great. After university, I don't have a lot of money, so that's going to be a great way to travel. So it kind of keep evolving. But then once you get involved, if you have that entrepreneurial spirit or a bit of thought about it anyway, you go, okay, this is a business. So we go back to, again, what you said, how I present myself, how my portfolio looks, when I go show my book, how I greet people, how I speak when I'm in the casting. Then from there you go on to say, okay, now what are the key markets I should be in? Where does my look work best? Oh, I worked well in Milan, but I didn't work as well in Spain. Okay, so now next year I have a strategy that I will be spending more time in Milan, and then I'm going to go to Japan because Japan's a good money market. Point being is that just from modeling already, you start to show that entrepreneurial self to plan out your year and how to best succeed and financially best return. And that just then continued to evolve, because when I wanted to move away from modeling, I said, what do I love to do but can still be a business? And it came down to photography. Again, kind of going away from my traditional education, but photography was a passion and I wanted to make it a business and I wanted to work for myself. So those are like those three pillars that I worked off of to create my photography career. That's what sustains you through. Because a friend of mine has a bit of a joke, another photographer. He said, what's the difference between a large pizza and a photographer? And he's like, a large pizza can feed a family of 4. Just in the aspect that photography is not always the most financially rewarding career. It's a challenge. It's tough, right? So I had to, again, dig into that entrepreneurial self to, it's not just I wake up every day, grab a camera and take pictures. I have to have a studio. I have to have staff. I have to deal with clients. I have to invoice clients correctly and client customer service. It's still a business is my point. Which then just continued on with the TV work, because even grander sort of scenarios that you're working with, because bigger crews, personalities, different characters, all levels of people who are involved in the production of the TV show. You need to have again, strong presence, strong brand, and some sort of sense of business, because now you are the product. Modeling, I was the product to a degree. Photography, my service was the product. But now TV is your look and your ability is the product. So now you're still selling yourself as a product and running a business.
Now, did that give your photography business a boost in and of itself, or did it give your personal brand a boost, or both, or which was more advantageous for you?
Now, that's an interesting question, honestly, because where I came from for my position in fashion photography, I developed a good high fashion recognizable advertising quality name. When I was first approached to do a top model program, from the fashion scene and perspective and where I positioned myself, it seemed like almost a downgrade to a degree. At first, because the fashion scene also very particular. Top model program is a mass market sort of thing. Within the fashion scene, it's seen as not real fashion, not real photographers, not real models, that sort of idea. So for me, I was thinking, okay, is this going to be a plus or is this going to hurt me? Because are people going to see me on the show and think, okay, this guy's playing photographer, he's not a real photographer? Or are people going to see my work and recognize, like, oh yeah, this guy really comes from a background where he's been producing quality work and truly working in the fashion industry? So it did take me a moment to think, is that a plus? Like, is Vogue not going to want to work with me anymore because I'm seen as this cheesy reality TV photographer? Or is this going to be something that elevates me? And I think I sort of also lucked out at a time where things were opening up more with the whole social media aspect of things, because it was less closed. If I can say that correctly, as in the idea now that you're on TV and having bigger brand recognition, even as a photographer, lends to the brands that shoot with you. Where before it might be thought, oh, well, you're not a real photographer because you're just playing one on TV, and we don't recognize reality TV as really being anything plus for us as a fashion brand or fashion magazine. So there was also a kind of a sweet spot there that I landed in that ultimately made Top Model a plus for me. In personal brand, of course, just simply millions that it was seen across Asian, actually billions of people seeing you on a TV screen with your name on the bottom. Can't really do much better than that in a sense for getting exposure. Sure. So as a brand, individual brand, Todd Anthony Tyler, that was definitely a plus. For fashion photography career, it did end up raising the profile as well.
Okay. Do you feel that being associated with the show took your personal brand and it kind of gave it a premature peak to where once the show kind of died off, your brand died off with it, and it forced you to move into some of your other ventures? Or moving away from the show into some of your other ventures, was that more intentional for you?
There's a combo of things that happened there. There's a big, long story about how I had a 5-year contract for Asia's Next Top Model, which ended up being 1 year in the end because there was a split within the whole production team about the show. Like I think I've commented to you previously, but there was a whole show within a show making Asia's Next Top Model, and I think if they would have turned the cameras onto what was happening behind the scenes, it might have been an even more dramatic and interesting show to watch.
That's fine.
And then it even culminated with my key contact and the head of the show passing away, which just changed everything. So that meant everything that we had planned in the 5-year plan and the direction and the season 2, everything sort of blew up overnight. But I think, especially for anyone listening, I'm going to tell you that as the entrepreneur person, that part of me, I've had things blow up overnight almost time and again. And I think that's where perseverance really comes in, and just stress management and handling those situations and getting out in front of it and beyond it. Those are what make you move forward. Also, I always have this sort of motto of pivot or die. And that's kind of a thing there. If I wanted to hold on to, now I'm this reality TV star so heavily, and that's the only thing I do, or only thing I'm sort of now capable of doing, then of course, financially, career-wise, it's ended. There's, people recognize you, like the face recognition. Once they check out your socials, that guy was on TV. Yeah, that still works for you. But if you were so married to that's the only thing you're going to be doing, well, then obviously I would not be able to have continued with the financial success and careers that I've had in other sectors overall.
Well,
using it as a leveraging point is good, but you had to make changes. You had to realize that, okay, we're moving on to something else now.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned this in a couple of our previous discussions as well, is tying your identity to any of that, right? I mean, if you had tied your personal identity to being that model, being that TV personality, then what you thought was going to be 5 years of enjoying this space, now it's cut to 1. Well, now who am I, right? I'm no longer on TV. What's my identity anymore? I see this, and to switch it to kind of the sports side of this podcast, I see it quite a bit with athletes and former athletes that, sometimes their careers are ended prematurely, right? They're halfway through a meteoric career, and, sophomore year of college or something, they blow out a knee and they're never the same after that. But they knew that's who they were. That's what they identified with. And they're not that person anymore. How do I now pivot and, to your point, pivot and grow, or, the alternative? How do I pivot and grow from that? Who do I become? How do I become somebody different? And so it's an important point you bring up. The other one that you mentioned, and unfortunately that the individual passed away, but it's also a lesson in we have to kind of be careful how tightly we tie our rope to any specific person or individual. The entrepreneurial journey is, you can rely on yourself and you can bring in great people around yourself, but be careful tying your rope to any one of those individuals because you just don't know. right? You don't know what's behind the curtain. You don't know who they are when they're not in the office necessarily. You don't know what their career trajectory is or isn't. So, the one person, the entrepreneurial journey that you certainly can rely on should be yourself. So,
right, absolutely. And that's why, again, that pivot or die or adapt or die, that's all coming from you internally. That's you recognizing the situation, recognizing what your talents are, abilities are. Hopefully they're endless, but you will recognize what you're good at and then, adjust accordingly. And absolutely, like what you said, they're obviously being the sort of head of the show by default, you're a little bit tied to them. But through the politics of the show, you also end up having to almost pick sides, which was difficult not to do because you didn't want to do that. But then you're sort of hedging your bets. Yeah. Okay, which way is this going to go? I guess this seems like the strength. But then, like anything in life, you're not sure 100% what's going to happen. In this case, to an ultimate situation where the individual's not here anymore. And then things change again. So absolutely, like you said, surrounding yourself with good people, definite positive idea. But tying so heavily to one individual, you just really never know what's going to happen there, truly.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I think that's a great lesson. So as long as we're kneading at scars, let's grab one of the other ones. Give us an idea of one of those failures that you had along the way and what made it so much of a learning experience for you.
Well, I guess one of the ones is the more recent ones, which personally I take a little less personal responsibility, but it still ends up being a failure in the entrepreneurial world. Part of an athleisure brand that was doing quite well. Actually been we've been around for about 17 plus years. So right from there, you start to get, and then I guess this is a point here, you start to get a little comfortable because things are going well, things are expanding, sales continue. You start to think you're past that, not very stable first year, 2, 3, we're past the 5-year mark sort of thing, which generally people judge by or use as a parameter. And then, we're moving into 20 years. We're talking about going public. Things look good. And then internally, I think this is also going back to tying to say one person so much, and perhaps one person having so much direct control and choice. But we just, I don't know. You want me to go with the whole story, but I'll just go out there with it. We end up blowing $1.4 million trying to keep a company alive by not making early choices, by living on hope, by living on perhaps old ideas, not recognizing the market has changed, not recognizing the market's not what it was 10 years ago, not recognizing what new players in the market, who our competitors are, and just, I think a lot of hope that wasn't calculated, if I can say it that way, as in you're just putting it up there that things will be better, or things will change, or things will become what they used to be, and that's generally not what happens. And once you blow through that much money, that much reserve, then you've pretty much crippled the company.
Well, I think what happens,
depending on the company, but the size of our company.
Yeah, I think what happens, you mentioned the word comfort. I think what happens is we stop moving with intent, right? We allow the company to just kind of flow. And the trouble is, as entrepreneurs, we work so hard to get it to that point of comfort that we feel like we deserve a vacation. Give me a little time off. Let me just kind of enjoy this piece a little bit, right? And we fall into that, and then it's kind of like getting out of bed in the morning. It's like, I'm so comfortable. I just love it here. And we stop acting with intent. And so we allow that market to impact us. We allow those other products to impact us. We allow the competitors to impact us. And one day we wake up and we realize, you know what? I'm not comfortable anymore. And you forget how you got there. Without kind of tearing some stuff down and starting over, you're not really sure how to get back to the leverage you had before. Maybe you look at the product mix and it's a little bit dry. You haven't done things for a while. It's interesting because in the early 2000s, I spent time working with a global pharmaceutical company. And at the time, they had gone through some purchases and bought some other smaller companies and stuff. But their pipeline, which is important for a pharmaceutical company because it's so long to bring a drug to market, their pipeline was kind of hurting a little bit. And they had a couple of their major revenue producers were coming off patent within a few years. And I don't want to say that they got comfortable because I wasn't close enough to the C-suite at that point to really tell you. But I think looking back at the signs, they probably had grown a little complacent, a little comfortable. They had gotten away from their core, what they did well. And as a result, when they looked up and saw their pipeline was empty, it's, well, now what? Well, let's go back to the pipeline. Let's get away from the stuff that's not part of our core. Let's get back to our pipeline, what we do well, and kind of go back at it. And I think a lot of times when entrepreneurs are in that comfort zone, they lose that intent around their product mix. They lose that intent around the sales process, and they allow that to go dry. Any of those can, you can wake up one day and realize those things are dry and you're in a tough spot.
Absolutely. And I think even here, I would say emotional factors as well. I always kind of comment, we're humans with emotions, obviously. Yep. But a lot of business choices, to me, I don't know if I'm saying this really correctly, but are more so mathematical or equations of sorts, if I'm articulating that correctly. But I just like when you start to factor in a lot of emotional choices, those aren't always the right choices for the company or the business to succeed and to continue. And I think that's also what's happened here. Besides getting comfortable is also a kind of an emotional choice as well. But you're just making choices on, even in our case, we had the factory. It was obviously recognizable probably several years before that we should cut the factory to save the rest of the company or to make ourselves have the financial resources to move forward. Well, we just kept holding the factory. And in part was because we had those people with us for over 15 years and we didn't want to fire them. That was, and it's a hard choice, super hard choice, but ultimately the choice was made for us. Yeah. So if we would have made those choices, which are, again, very hard, emotional choices, you do not want to do that to people. But if we would have done it 2 years before, the company would have survived, where now it's pretty much done. And those people maybe got a couple more years of work, but they were ultimately also out of work and a little bit unprepared, I suppose.
Well, and I think that's where that lack of intent comes back to bite us. We don't make the decisions because it's a tough decision. We don't really want to step out and do that kind of thing. And if you wait long enough, it's going to happen to you whether you like it or not. And so, this is where, these organizations that do layoffs and that kind of stuff for trimming for expenses and stuff, not all of them do it for the right reasons. But every once in a while, especially the smaller companies, when they let go of specific divisions or individuals or, they continually trim the fat and that kind of stuff, it allows them to continue to grow. It's no different than pruning a tree, right? You continually look at it and say, what parts of this are extraneous? What parts are not needed? What parts are not allowing me to grow the direction I want to grow? And if you can trim that tree and, pull a few here and there as you go, it grows much better. And it's tough. It's not easy conversations, but sometimes we just outgrow people or we outgrow relationships.
Yeah, that's definitely a factor as well. But absolutely, like you said, small to mid-sized businesses, what I've seen even outside of my own business, if you hold on to some parts too long, it brings down the entire company. Whereas like our own example, again, if we probably let one way or the other, actually, either let the retail end go and just focus on the factory, which was the core beginning of the company, or let go of the factory and focus on the retail aspect. Because ultimately bringing down the company means everyone at the factory lost their job and everyone working at the office lost their job. Where if you would have let one side go or the other, the company would have continued, and at least some people would still have a job. So there's also those aspects.
So out of curiosity, did you ever have, as a leadership team, did you ever have that conversation of letting one go and then consciously say, we can't do that? Or did you just kind of, had a gut feeling, but, well, let's wait and see what the numbers look next month. Well, let's wait till next year. Or was there a conscious decision there?
That's where, when you have a shared partnership, and in my particular case, not a majority hold on the company, where I can give my ideas, thoughts, and suggestions, but then ultimately, are they listened to or not? Probably anyone who's in business with partners or other people have similar types of experiences. You can be really bro, good friends, but then when you come down to business and business thoughts and business direction, financial choices, there can lie differences. Yep. I think what was really done was exactly what you said. It's like, let's wait till next month. Oh, let's see how sales go. Oh, it's a little slow. Like, let's give it 6 more months. But that, sometimes those changes, the slides in the market, the all the factors that every business sort of pressures you deal with on an almost daily basis can crush you rapidly. And so that waiting that next month or 6 months was not a good idea.
Yeah.
And the choices, again, like you said, are made for you.
Yeah. And we've talked about this. I think you and I might have talked about it. I know I've mentioned it on the podcast a couple of times. I mean, that partnership relationship is so critical. And people, sometimes we get into those relationships over, a burger, a beer, and a napkin, and we scribble it out. Oh, you'll do this and I'll do this. And, a couple beers later, you've got the entire thing figured out. But the issue with that is people don't treat a business partnership like a marriage, and they should. Right? There's some people that can succeed getting married after a first date, or they elope here in Vegas, and they have a wonderful life together. But the likelihood of that succeeding is minimal. We want to date a little bit. We want to figure each other out a little bit. We want to figure out who leaves the cap off the toothpaste and who leaves the toilet seat up, and all of those kind of things we need to figure out before we ever get into business together. Right? What is your philosophy on business? What are the skills that you bring to the table? Do they mirror my skills, or do they complement my skills? Right? Are we going to have the same view on things, so we're constantly butting heads if we're on opposite sides, or are we better off by seeing both sides of it? How are you an A personality and I'm a C personality? Are you all of these things about how we're going to migrate our business, how we're going to move that business, how we're going to grow it? The brand we're going to be, who's going to be the face of the brand, who's going to run the people, who's out front office, who's back office, who's sales, who's operations. If we don't talk about some of those things before we get in business, we have to figure them out on the fly. And sometimes we're already in that business marriage before we ever figure it out.
Yeah, I've been involved in quite a few different businesses, and exactly what you said. So many of them over a beer and a burger scribbled on a napkin. And I think that's okay, because a lot of great ideas have come from that. But there, I think you have to recognize all those aspects and points that you were saying. If it's going to be like a little side hustle and you want to play with this idea, you're not so married to the idea kind of thing. And then if it succeeds or not succeeds, you're not financially crushed or something like that. Then fine. Those are, I think, as an entrepreneurial spirited person, fun things to play with. But if you're going to say, we're going to make a serious business about this, we want to scale, we want to maybe sell one day. If you want a serious business, yes, you need to know your partner well. You need to have it well structured. You need to get way beyond that napkin and some scribbles. Then you have something to work off of, creating a solid business. Yeah,
the trouble comes in when that side hustle actually gets some legs, and all of a sudden now we've got a business out of it. And how do we go back and say, well, you know what, you're really not the person I want to be a partner with. I want this guy in here instead. That becomes difficult. Yeah.
That's true. I've seen that. I've absolutely seen that as well.
So what are you doing now? Right? We've got the athleisure's kind of gone by the wayside. Tell me what you're doing now.
So basically, I feel it just culminates all the things I've been doing into one thing, which is PR, which is what I've been doing essentially right back to the modeling days, where you're representing brands and representing yourself, and literally sometimes on PR type activities for brands, maybe in a smaller capacity, but that's what you're doing. And then having that element of PR with my own photography career, right all the way into when we had to go and do the circuit to talk about the TV shows, radio, TV, interviews about the TV show. You're doing all the PR work for the TV show there as well, by default anyway. So PR was always an aspect of everything I did. So natural sort of way to move for continuing to do that for other companies. And then digital marketing and social media, just by one part being the current, where advertising a lot happens these days, just the current market and how this sort of thing works. Clearly, we're a little bit moved away from more conventional sources of TV, radio,
Sure.
magazines, newspapers. Some of that's still done, but there's a lot of focus on digital marketing, social media. And in that environment or in that sector, I find a lot of sometimes misinformation or misunderstanding, or people really don't know how it all works, but find it necessary. So for myself, I've always been part of that. I understand how it works. So PR, digital marketing, social media is just a strong area for me with my experience and my knowledge. And so for about 5 years now, I've been running a PR firm or company that focuses on that.
Good. So what are some of the lessons you've picked up on starting this new company, or for that matter, which lessons from the old companies have you used to not make the same mistake again this time?
Well, definitely aspects of, always one is financial. You always I find anyway, you have to be strong on the financials, as in budgets, where you budget things, how you use the money, how much money you have in reserve, where the money, you project the money's coming from, but doesn't always happen, especially when you're self-employed, selling a service, when people pay, when people maybe sometimes don't pay. So you have to factor all those things into your budgets and your financial.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's the only aspect, of course, running a successful business, but I feel from other experiences, people think, oh, that will sort of take care of itself. Oh yeah, we'll do this and we'll get some money there and we'll do some stuff like that. And I always found that's end up being the downfall of businesses, when the financial was not kind of looked at right from the beginning, sort of taken care of right from the beginning, and realized what you can do and what you cannot do at this certain time. Obviously, having ideas of where you want to go and budgeting for where you want to go, yes, absolutely. But sometimes stretching that budget too far or things like that downplay the downfalls for business. So definitely I've taken all that into consideration here. And I think also diversifying, in particular with what I'm doing. And I think it goes back to what you say, tying yourself to one person or one company. I absolutely can't do that with my digital marketing company, just because if you're so tied into one client and that client either has financial problems themselves or just decides to move in another direction, suddenly next month you have no cash flow. Yep. So for me, in this particular business anyway, diversifying the clients that I have, diversifying the type of clients that I have, so that I have like a hair care product, I have a kinesiology tape, I have a food product, so I have different types of products as well. And then partially as well, surrounding yourself with the right team. I have a staff of 2, we can pull up 3 if we need, but having a strong supportive staff, and also that staff recognizing that you are a small business, a small to medium-sized business, so we don't always offer what a larger business is going to be able to offer you in terms of compensation and health plan and things like this. So a supportive team obviously is an important aspect of running something like this.
Yeah, I think I think the theme kind of today is all about intent, right? And starting that with intent, following the financials with intent, creating a budget and following that budget with an intent. Every dollar you spend, especially when you're small, has to be spent with intent, because it has to be, am I spending this to make money, or am I spending this to find other people who can help me make money, right? Hiring with intent, hiring people that are in there for the future of the business. They buy into that vision. It's not just they need a job, so they're here because they need a job. Because a couple weeks later, they're going to realize they're not getting paid what somebody else is, or they're not getting a 401k like somebody else is, and they'll be gone. Right? You want them to buy into that vision and be in there for long term with you, because you can't give them what some of the other companies can. So you need them to have an internal, intrinsic type of drive, and that comes from buying into the vision. But also, you're going to be asking a lot of them, right? Especially in the early stages. And so it's going to be unpredictable. It's going to be hard work. But as we all know, all of us entrepreneurs, as we all find, there's some satisfaction in building something. There's just some satisfaction in being part of something that starts as a seed or an idea and becomes something that's much larger than that.
Absolutely. I think that's why even if your staff that you hire, they have to have an entrepreneurial spirit as well, because they, like you said, you need them to believe in you. They need to believe in the vision, to believe what you're doing, have some interest what you're doing overall. And then from there, have that little bit of spirit that we're growing something, we're making something, and together we're building it up, which is a little bit exciting.
Yep. So this has been good. I like this. We could talk for hours, for goodness sakes. Give me an idea of the top lesson, maybe two lessons that you would give to any entrepreneur out there, whatever stage they're in. What are those couple things that you'd say to them?
I think I kind of touched on it already, but I've just said this to a lot of people, even when I was teaching photography for a while to all those young photographers, recognizing again that photography was a business, so they are getting involved in running a business. And in that, well, what you said with the intent, obviously, that's a very important one. All those aspects of intent, absolutely. But that pivot or die or idea, you have to recognize that, I think, a lot within a business of any sort. That being too married, too tied to a singular idea or a singular vision or a singular direction, that's not going to help you. You have to be able to adapt and change, sort of read the room, recognize the market, and then things happen to you on a daily. There's a factor of luck. I would say there's even a factor of luck that you can't really calculate for, because of course it's luck. So you have to consider, what's happened to me? Have I, say, been lucky and things are moving in this direction, and so I'm going to capitalize on that? Or have things not really gone in that direction and I need to look in another direction? So that flexibility, that accepting that you might have to change, those are definitely what I tell all young entrepreneurs as well. And then what I also touched on is just recognizing the financials right from the beginning. I know it's tough. I mean, most people don't start off with a lot of capital. They don't start off with a lot of money in the bank. You're probably doing everything yourself. You're wearing a lot of hats, and you're the entire team of everything. And it can, hours and hours and hours of your day. I think most young entrepreneurs or early stage companies, you're working like, without question, 14 hours a day. Maybe not a great thing, but you're constantly on your phone, constantly on your computer, maybe these days constantly on Zoom call or taking a meeting somewhere. It's a lot of work, but if you love what you're doing, if you love that you're building something, you see your vision, it's an exciting form of work.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Yeah, I think the interesting part of the first part of what you said about evolution, those that listen to me and have heard the podcast, they've heard me talk about this before, and that's the evolution of us as entrepreneurs, or evolution of a leader. We have to give ourselves permission to do that, right? And it's kind of where Legacy Unscripted came from, right? We have an idea of what we want our legacy to be. We have an idea where we want to get to, and we think we know what it's going to take to get there. The unscripted part comes in. We have really no idea, and we have to learn on the fly. We have to give ourselves permission to evolve and become somebody different as we learn what it's like to be an entrepreneur, as we learn how to be a leader, as we learn how to be a manager of people, etc.
Right. 100%. From my experience, anyway, that's what's brought me from biology student to owning a PR firm today, and all those transitions in between, all those experiences and jobs, careers in between, is being able to make those changes and recognize those changes, capitalize on things, but that flexibility, having that flexibility.
Sure. Well, Todd, I think that's a great place to stop. Thank you for your time. I appreciate the time today.
It's my pleasure.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Legacy Unscripted. So if today's conversation sparked something in you, don't just let it sit. Take action to build your future today. Make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who might need to hear it. And if you've got a story to share or you want to connect, you know where to find me. Until next time, keep it real, keep it bold, and keep living your legacy.